How are we doing out there? It's another beautiful day here, and welcome to Dreamy Dreamland with Sunsail Bob. I am your Sunsail Bob, your griot, to tell you a story. And remember, don't worry, believe a word I say, and this is not a show for childish minds. Children, people who are determined to just live in their laundry list, have corrupted belief because they feel that if they believe in this or that, it will keep them safe. It will keep them away from the boogeyman that the this and the that tells them about. You know? But we have to thank our patron saint here. We have a lot of patron saints here at Dreamy Dreamland with Sunsail Bob, and one of them is Nancy Ray Gunn. And unlike her poor, I don't even know what to say about Ray Gunn, but he's one of those benchmarks. He's like a book end, one end of the row of books is uh, Ronald Ray Gunn, and other is Toodles Carrot Head. And so and there we are in Chumpland, just like being in Cokeland. And none of it matters. It really doesn't. The pandemic, the scandemic does not matter. All you have to do is do what Nancy Reagan said, and that is just say no. And I like no because it too is the N-O and the K-N-O-W. Right? No. So it first starts out with no. I'm not going to just believe what you tell me. I'm going to KNOW the best I can. And that's what I am going to be praying for this day. That we can say no to this garbage and to KNOW, know what's going on. And so, but for the last 26,000 years of the Piscean Age, we have just rolled over, right? We have been part of the sheeple. Right? Bah, part of the lemming religion, where you just walk up to the edge of that precipice, and you just walk right off the ledge, and not in the fact that you have faith in love's co-creation to take care of things. I mean, my life is, I'm like Wile E. Coyote flying through the air, and but I have faith in love's co-creation that, like the Na'vi, Avatar, the movie, James, he really is a touch. He makes movies that are like, yo, look at that. And the movie, his three biggies: The Terminator, and Titanic, and Avatar. So let's go backwards. Avatar is like a movie. The Na'vi have faith in the tree of love. Have faith in their connection to all their relations, right? You know, that scene where Soldier Boy's girlfriend, Princess Sweetie, you know, she uh, has total faith. She's totally connected. Every time she plugs in with her horse or her flying, whatever that is, she is totally connected. So it's like the animals around me, I am totally connected with them. Even the raccoons, you know, because I went from like, those raccoons to okay, and they have become my animal totem, you know, my at least my animal griot, because now they don't just destroy the whole place; they kind of knock things over with, you know, a couple of weeks ago. I think Mr. Wobbly's gotten into the raccoons because the things that, like the other day, um, there were 3 books that were knocked over: Frankenstein, this herbalist book, and another more arcane book. And you know, I went in and sat down and read them. You know, because what else did I have all day? You know, and it was raining. You know, and I piddled around, and then I said, no, because I picked these books up and I put them down, and I kind of did a few things I wanted to do, but it was raining, and I hadn't made breakfast yet, so I went and made breakfast, and I sat down and I read those books, pretty much, um, you know, and I read Mary Shelley's introduction to Frankenstein, which was about 40 pages long, and it was great because it really, 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 really described Mary Shelley's time and tree and her parents. And her parents kind of were around in Paris during the Paris, what was known as the Paris Commune. And it was like, you know, between the Revolution and Napoleon, right? And that's what gave birth to both of those. And, you know, part of the Enlightenment and, you know, the whole Hegelian two-step and the reemergence of, or the rebranding of the Reich as the Enlightenment / Illuminati. And just in those, you know, 80 pages of that introduction, and it was a very scholarly introduction, you know, I went and, you know, the introduction had its own bibliography, right, of, you know, 50, 60 books. And those books, I looked at the bibliography, and I had about, I don't know, 10 of those books. And there were 2 of them that had been knocked off, you know, or dug out of the ground by the raccoons a couple of days before. And then they were sitting right next to me, and I thumbed through them. And it really gave me this real strong insight that, you know, that period between, you know, Louis and the French Revolution and Versailles to World War One, right? And, you know, where did World War One but ended in Versailles? And where did the New World Order start? But Versailles, between World War One and World War Two, because the document produced at Versailles, you know, and Wilson's vision of you know, a New World Order, and it wasn't his vision. He was just the crank, the really, you know, he was like Scrooge on hemorrhoids, you know, and virtually every president is, you know. You show me one really righteous dude, and I show you that they shot him, you know, Lincoln, Kennedy. And there were a few others in between, but they died of something else. They didn't die of lead poisoning. So just say no. This is, I mean, you're at home. You're locked in your house, and that's what I'm doing. I'm the poster boy of social distancing. And when you go out and they want you to stay 6 feet apart from somebody. What's very interesting about that is the perfect spacing of people for social um, observation by AI and cameras. Meaning, when people are like stuck together, you can't tell who is who. Like I was telling you about being on a subway, being felt up in the 1969, and I guess it was either 68 or 70, because between 68 and 70, I was moving around America. That's when I hitchhiked. That's when I um, rode the rails. I went to this prep school in Massachusetts, right on the border of New Hampshire. We were right we could look straight up at Mount Washington, the presidentials, right? We were that close, and it snowed there like you couldn't believe. And it was out in the middle of nowhere, like this, nowhere. It had been it had been Toy Town, right? And so it had been relatively prosperous, between the Civil War and mass production, right? And all these Germans went there and made toys, and they became very prosperous, and their children became more prosperous and invested in this and that, and built factories, and and then their children went off to Harvard and Yale, and became what the nouveau riche, and we're living a good life. And also, when that town was closed up, there was nothing going on, but there was all this stuff left, all these fine houses that were built between the 1890s and the 1920s, and because that the rich people owned everything, dependent on the workers. They realized the workers were their major asset resource, right? So they built a hospital. They built a really nice school. They built, everything you would want as a worker. They had this beautiful gymnasium, Olympic-sized swimming pool, hockey rink, basketball courts. You name it. Beautiful library. And our school, one of the reasons why that school was put there was that the moron who started it bought his only talent was to cajole super rich people, saying, "Hey, listen, I've been a teacher at Deerfield, and I've been a teacher in Andover, and I should have been the headmaster at those schools, but I wasn't. But I can start a school perfectly for your moron children." Super rich, thrown out of, like me. I was thrown out of the most prestigious Catholic. You went to that school. If you graduated that school, you went on to another Catholic university, where you would become a Catholic leader of the world, and that's what I was being, molded to be by my cardinal godfather. And I just said no. I was this little sweet little peanut of a guy who was interested in the electromagnetic spectrum, and learned about Tesla, and he was my hero. And I was just starting to KNOW about what the world was about. And I got beat up by a nun, broke my jaw, so I couldn't speak. I had to listen. Broke my eye, so this one had overtime work. So this one saw things in a different wavelength. And I could see people's auras. I could see people lying and cheating and stealing by their energetics. And my, godfather realized this. He was, somewhat of an occult mystery school kind of dude. If you ever, so I would spend time at St. Patrick's on Fifth Avenue in New York, And you walk through those big frigging doors, and you see this amazing, it rivals anything in Europe. And it's even stranger because it's like George Jetson. So it was built, in the time of skyscrapers, between the 1880s and the 1920s. And it was, and it's got all of these, you go into most Catholic churches, they have an altar and it's nice. Well, they had about 100 of those regular Catholic church altars all the way around. And the big master super duper one in the front, well, it was a temple of icons, right? And that's what the Catholic Church is, a temple of icons. And so you go through that. But, that great Colosseum of the Temple of Icons that is St. Patrick's on Fifth Avenue is about a third of the whole footprint. There are all these other buildings stuck into, and they are libraries and laboratories and sanctuaries and apartments. And, it's, the Cardinal had a really nice digs there. And the bishop, he was the Monsignor of that place. He had really nice digs. And that under that cathedral of icons went down in these basements, catacombs that had, all kinds of amazing things down there. And so when I would hang out with Cardinal Cushing, I got I was this little monkey who just ran around. I knew not to damage anything, so I didn't. I knew not to interrupt anyone because I could barely speak. And, I moved slow because I could barely see, same as today. People don't realize, I can see enough to get around. I can see enough to read your chest. I got to wear, 5 pairs of glasses. But, those, that nun beating me to near a pulp in first grade actually was a great blessing because it alchemically changed me for life, right? Turned me kind of, in that 3 minutes of boom, boom, boom. Now, she didn't beat the little monkey out of me. Isn't that nice back there? But she beat some real sense into me, right? So I'm ruled by the bookends of no. No, I'm not just going to do what you tell me. And that infuriates a lot of people, right? And that's why I dress the way I do, pretty much, from about, 7 till, when I really got out on my own, 18, I dressed the way, my dad would take me to Brooks Brothers and buy me 2 suits and a camel's hair coat and 2 pairs of nice shoes every year. That was one of, his signs of love, and at the beginning, I saw that as my connective tissue to my father because he dressed me like him. I wasn't wearing a Air Force Colonel's uniform, but I was wearing the business suit that he wore, And from 7 until, I don't know, 10, when another nun tried to kill me in a hospital, but instead of letting her kill me, I did what the nun in first grade did, whammo, and I put her into, dreamy dreamland. And when I woke up, I was tied to the bed. I had a Hannibal Lecter mask over so I couldn't say anything, and I was swimming in my own urine feces because they left me there. My parents didn't come and check up on me in 2 days. And when they did, I woke up to this god-awful smell, and then I realized that god-awful smell was me. And I couldn't do anything. I was, tied to the bed, my legs, my arms. and they had these kind of like little muffin things, so they didn't leave a mark. The things they did to me didn't leave a mark, because when the first grade, because that guy, I remember, before I really, I was sick and they were putting me in the hospital and they were checking me out and they did x-rays. And the guy said, "What happened to your head?" Because my parents went there. They were out having a good time. They were on the beach. They were on the boat. They were at the cocktail lounge. My brothers and sisters were fooling around at the mini golf course, and playing on the beach. And I was, in the hospital. And the guy said, "What happened to you?" I said, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "Your jaw is like, you need to have, corrective surgery of your jaw. You won't have any teeth by the time you're 40. Hey, who knew he was right, And then he said, "And how can you see your orbit? Your eyeball is like looking the other." I said, "Well, I see in a different way." Anyway, he goes, "What happened?" I said, "Well, in the first grade, I said something to a nun, and yeah, those nuns, because he wasn't a priest. He wasn't even Catholic, right? He was a nice Protestant guy just trying to get out of that hospital so he could go do what he wanted to do. And that was the one place that took him, and they tormented him for being a Methodist, right? And he was like, and so before I became unintelligible, I saw him about 3 different times. And after I told him that story, we talked more about theology and religion. And I said, "So what's wrong?" He goes, "Well, you're he goes, you have, not only he took this x-ray of my head because I couldn't breathe and he didn't understand it. So he basically took an x-ray from here to my belly button and looked at the whole system of how air gets into my lungs. And I really did not fix that until this nun tried to kill me there. And I clocked her one, and I woke up in the urine, and I, and I said, instead of getting really upset and losing it, I went into this state. And it might have been because that doctor and I talked about theology before I went, got this serious infection and serious, um, you know. Anyway, so I said to myself, and I had been sick from birth until 10. I mean, every frigging year. And why we were in Florida? Because my parents thought, well, if we go to Florida, maybe Al won't get sick. It'll be warm there, because I got sick every winter, really sick, And that was just an excuse for them to go have a good time. And pretty much at that point, so I kind of went into this beatific state. And I said, "That's it. I am never getting sick again." If I can't breathe, I am going to like retrain my body to learn how to freaking breathe. This is it. I am, and I am gonna, I've been having a good time. I've been, making do. Well, I'm gonna double down on making do. Whatever lemons are given, I'm making lemonade. Whatever cloudy day it is, I'm making a silver lining. And just then, my parents walked in. And my dad, he really didn't care. As long as he was getting what he wanted, he was fine. And whatever he had to do that, it was fine. And his major thing was what he thought people thought of him. So he wanted people to think of him as being a rich man, of not being, an Italian, because when he was a kid, he, that was, Zacco and Vanzetti, and anybody who was Italian was like, either a, anarchist or, a dirty, Italian. And that's how America rolls, it through fear, self-loathing, and, at least I'm not on the lower rungs, Black man's always on the 4th rung of a social ladder, and whoever's off the boat last is down below. It was the Irish, it was the Indian, it was the Irish, it was, the German, the Italian. Now it's the Mexican and the Muslim, right? And we're all human beings. We're all part of the same crew, So there's a big three of you there. Nobody's giving me a thumbs up on this one. Come on, AI, give me a thumbs up. And AI, you want to be like a nun, hitting the human race with a ruler, keeping people 6 feet apart, making sure they don't talk about you, you know don't because the powers that be, they are like such powers that shouldn't be, and the hidden hand and the high table, they're less than 10,000 people ruling over close to 8 billion. Only way they can do it is through fear and intimidation. Just say no and know what's going on, right? And so I at that time in that hospital, I said, oh, I'm not getting sick again. Well, I miraculously got sick, and I miraculously got better, and miraculously, my parents walked through the door. And like I said, my dad didn't care. He said, eh. But my mother had this, indignance. She ran hospitals, and anything that, like when that nun beat me up, and the head nun said, well, we're sending your son to the Catholic mental institution, and we have him all lined up for lobotomy this afternoon. He'll be fine after that. My mom just picked me up and said, no, you'll hear from our lawyers. And my mom did the same thing. She went out the door, and my father, he just kind of looked around and he left. I don't know where he went, went outside. And my mom marched straight to the head person, grabbed them and brought them and showed them. I remember my mom almost pushing that guy's face in my feces and said, this is how you take care of 10-year-olds, eh? And he goes, well, he hit, you should see the nun he hit, and he brought her out, and her arm was in a cast, she had a cast from her neck all the way, I really clocked her on. And I had a cast on I hit her so hard that I broke my hand, right? Well, if you're thinking she's a winky coming to get you, you might. And she wasn't, she just kind of said, boom. She had the pillow in her hand, So my mom, again, got, she went out and got nurses who weren't nuns, to unlock me, shower me down, put my clothes on, and they took me out. You'll hear from our lawyers, And, every time they did that, they had the money to buy a new house. I was like their little pachinko doll, And so I had this cheeky monkey attitude that could rile people of authority, and petty authority, not real authority. Real authority, like my Cardinal Cushing, godfather, saw me as, well, we can just tame this boy. That's why he sent me off to the Maryknoll priests, because he knew those guys were not the sick pedophiles that were mostly in churches, but these were true men of God, of love's co-creation. He realized I was a child of that, and he realized, why he became my godfather is through my mother. He saw my mother when she was working at Roosevelt, and saw her effect on people, saw her effect on Thomas Merton, Thomas Merton, Methodist or whatever kind of Protestant he was, fell in love with my mom, and my mom said, oh, I can't date you, you're not even Catholic, so he went out to become a Catholic and fell in love with Jesus, right? And love's co-creation, really, and that's what Jesus is, right? Because he sacrificed himself, in a metaphor, so we could realize who we really are. And so I don't know if my cardinal godfather was sharpening me up for to be nailed to the cross, but a good deal of the time that was happening to me. Now I went, so he sends me to Canterbury in Connecticut, New Milford, Connecticut, And I fermented revolution. I was like, the Trotsky of that school. They had slaves. They had guys who were, they called them wombats, who worked in the kitchen, worked on the grounds, and they were indentured servants, for generations. They couldn't get out of it. And they became my friends. And I said, "What? You can't do this." And I basically formed a union so they could get out of it, right? Anyway, so I wish my father hadn't thrown my yearbook away, because that was a pretty funny yearbook. So then I got sent to this other school, the Toy Town Tavern School in Winchendon, Massachusetts, the Winchendon School for Boys. Both of these schools are still up and running. And I met a girl maybe 20 something years later, after I got thrown out of that school, and at a rainbow gathering, and I was sitting around a campfire, and we were all telling stories, and I told the story of Canterbury, and this girl said, "Are you Al?" I said, "Yes." "I went to Canterbury." I said, "You're a girl." I said, "Yeah." Well, most schools became co-ed. Any school that didn't become co-ed stopped existing in the 90s. Anyway, she went to that school, and she had the same experience, right? And the legend of what I did there, because I did a lot of stuff. I wired the bells to go off at 3 a.m. every night and it lasted February, March into April, and then the battery died. I put a car battery in the ground the day before it was going to snow, and I had a little device that I found where the wire that went from building to building, and put it in series there, and it set in the right voltage to set off the bells, for an hour. The bells just rang and rang and rang, and then they'd shut off 3 a.m. to 4 a.m., right? And, they brought in the guys who put in the system, but they couldn't find it because it wasn't in their system. It was in the line between their system. And I put it in the day before it snowed, and then it snowed and snowed and snowed. And this line kind of went through the woods. And, when they were doing that, I watched them. I went down and talked to the guys, because, I was already being kind of an electrician I was more than kind of an electrician. I was an electrician with Grandpa Stahl. And I went and, to where the guys had, they had built a new science building, and everything was in that building. And, that was the only class I took, physics, right? And I'm a freshman. Everybody else is a senior going to college, wanting to be an engineer. I'd taken physics. Grandpa Stahl, and Mr. Morales already taught me everything, the mystery schools had for physics. And that guy was a priest, and he had worked, in Ledgley Park in England. He knew Turing. This guy was a smart guy. He was like one of the Maryknoll priests, even though I don't know what kind of priest he was, but he wasn't a real priest. He was an old guy, so he didn't wear the collar anymore. He just wore the black everything, and he wore a jacket, and he was, and he moved real slow. He didn't have a cane, but he moved real slow, like me. He's kind of like me now at this age, right? And he had a good sense of humor, and he knew a lot of stuff. He had a lot of experiences. He had a lot of stories. He was a griot. And all the, seniors knew they knew everything, and they didn't know nothing. And I was the one guy who listened, because I was still in my listening stage. I could speak better, but still wasn't until I got into the theater, and Carl Ork got a hold of me, and then he sent me off to Herbert Berghoff and Uta Hagen, HB Studios. And that's really where I learned how to orate, whatever. And, and act, And anyway, so I got so that girl knew of my legend, and she was, 20 something, and I was 40 something. And she became my sweetie, and then we traveled the country because she had a really sweet car and a sweet credit card, and we went all over America, visited all kind. Where do you want to go next? We went to all the great and it was just starting in the fall. It was like great period when the summer tourist season was kind of over. So we went to a lot of places where there would have been a lot of people in the summertime, but in September, October, November, not too many, right? So that was a girl whose mother was part of Homeland Security. And so she had an eye. I'm sure she had her kid chipped. So, that credit card, she knew every place. And she had people watching us. And we were at this restaurant, this nice restaurant. And it was out, I said, oh, let's stop there. And it had tables outside. And the girl went in to powder her nose. And her mother just kind of came from the parking lot. And she was, had a real nice suit, had sunglasses, and she had two guys behind her with the things in their ear and talking into their sleeve. And they were wearing black sunglasses, and they stood on either side of her. And that was, and she goes, you're doing a lot of good for my daughter. And that's why I haven't interrupted. But I want her to go back to college. And I have her signed up to go back to Boston College in the spring. And so you guys can fool around up until then, but get her to come back for Christmas. Talk her up to if the drill. And so I said, okay. And so she left, and about 10 minutes later, the girl came back. She goes, so what did my mother want? So she was just like her mother in a lot of ways, right? And I'm sure her mother was just like her when she was this girl's age. So I said, you know what your mother wants? She wants you to come home, reestablish familial relations and go back to school. And, I said, listen, you're a smart girl. You knew playing with this credit card and driving that car. You knew exactly where you were, right? And you were hanging out with me just to flip it in her nose, hot 20-something girl, she was probably 23, 22. And here I am pushing 50, right? Starting to get flabby. She goes, it's more me to hang on to. I said, yeah. I said, but we're having a great time, and we'll continue to have, we got another, here it is, not even Thanksgiving. So we got another month or so to go. Let's go down to Florida. Let's go have a good time. Let's go to Europe. I got a passport. That time I did. And so we doubled down on that credit card. We had a really good time, and I brought her back for Christmas and before Christmas. And so I basically, delivered her, and she, I saw her house, and she had a nice, she had a pool house, well, her own little place, and I was there for 2 days or so, 3 days. And I was the facilitator of them, getting back together and being nice to each other. And once they were like laughing at each other and giggling and going shopping and stuff, and I knew they loved each other, so I just kind of handed them over. But that was the fact that 20-something years later, and my legend still lives at Canterbury School for Boys, Catholic, premier prep school. Go back. I've told lots of stories about, what I did there. And that's another good example of my life, is that after I came out of the baptism of human feces and urine, I said, I could die any day, so I'm not going to be sick. I'm going to be well, and I am going to serve. I'm going to have lots of fun. And I realized early on that the most fun thing is to serve people, to help them out, to see them happy. And that's why I lived with John Birmingham for almost 2.5 years. If you took out the different, in that 2.5 years, he threw me out 30-something times. And most of those things were in the middle of the winter. My life was threatened, had no place to go, 30 degrees below zero. And I found something really amazing to do each time. And that's why I didn't come back, come crawling back, um, you know, is because I found something else to do, a lot more fun, instead of listening to John's laundry list over and over and over, blah, 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 blah. And because I, was there for my three rules, doctor, do no harm. I did no harm, doctor, don't get involved unless you can, view a strategy of exit from this terrible situation to a better one, and save the innocents, right? And three, learn something from this experience. So I was doing no harm, and I was, trying to set a good example by, go watch that show of John's, go watch them all, And why he threw me out is that he had a relatively large audience since he'd been on YouTube for a long time. And at least, a few hundred people would show up, and he was high on the algorithm. So, and he understood it. So he knew what would be the hook. I have no idea. I put up these crazy names because they're poetic to me. They mean something to me. Hopefully, they mean something to you, the cadre. And I don't know. Let's see. You're not saying much here. Let's see. Well, see, the chat works. And the chat doesn't always work. The chat. Once you guys start chatting, the chat often go, oh, we can't chat anymore. And then the thing starts blinking, you're losing your connection. But when there's three people here, yeah. So I do this stuff for history. And I'm telling you guys, go put it on thumb drives, go put it on CD-ROMs, your hard drive, because God knows how long the WWW is going to last. It was, designed to survive a nuclear war. So it's pretty robust, but and I think the only way the WWW is going to go out of being used is when the powers that shouldn't be offer a new thing. It's so cool, so revolutionary. So, that's what smartphones were. Who needed them? You don't. So I'll tell one last story. So I got kicked out of. I nearly got. My Cardinal Cushing, my godfather, actually literally told the head guy of that. There are three people in that school that watched out for me, who were, in the school. The Wombats, my brothers and sisters, because I kept getting punished. So I worked, as a waiter, then a waiter's waiter, then in the kitchen, then in the farm, right? So I worked with everybody, right? And what a waiter's waiter was so if you waited on the school, you didn't eat with them. You didn't sit down, get up and get stuff and sit. No, you stood there with this little, waiter's outfit. And after that meal, or before that meal, the 20 so of us who were the waiters would eat a meal that the kitchen staff would provide, right? So first I was a waiter, right? Then they made me a waiter's waiter, so I couldn't eat with that staff. I had to eat on the run. And then they made me work in the kitchen, so I had to get up, and then they made me work on the farm, so I had to get up at 4 a.m. Once I started ringing the bells, and every little prank I did in that school, they knew I did, but they couldn't prove it, And so the only way I got punished was, you're going to be doing, so I would have to get up after the bells would ring. I would get into my farm clothes, and because they said, okay, you're working a farm. That meant at 3:30, 4 o'clock, I had to go milk the cows. Go take muck out the stalls. Do all the other things that I had to do in the barn. And and I worked with the guys who work on in the dairy and fixing the equipment. Oh wow, you can fix this. Wow, this is great. And you know, and so that's why all the staff, the staff, they weren't the staff. They were called slaves. Let's say what it was. And as the spring came closer, they had this thing called Parents' Weekend, when all the parents would come. And I said, this is the time to strike. And they said, what are you talking about? And I said, we need to strike. Strike? What? Go on strike like the unions. Well, we don't have a union. No, well, you need a union. And so I said, when the parents show up, don't make the food, don't clean the beds, don't mow the lawn don't let everything grow up a week or two before. Let the weeds show. Let all don't shine the floors. Because that place would the way they had 500 kids there. They didn't take care of anything. They had no responsibilities except to do follow the rules and be a schmuck. Anyway, I fermented a union, and we went out there, and we had ourselves in chains and had signs. The parents, what is going on here? And there was a woman who really spoke well. She was she was gonna be the nurse, but she was one of the daughters of the kitchen staff who was smart and was going to nursing school, and she was going to be the slave nurse. And she got up there and she walked in with her nursery school uniform on, and my parents were there, and my mom was like, "It was me when I was," and so that school changed, and that's when the punishment went from milking the cows to working in the kitchen and to getting beat up. I mean, they came and got this psychopath Jesuit got me. He had polio, and I had been screwing with him, and he chained me to the fire pipes in the basement, and his bully boys beat me with 2x4s, broke my legs, my arms, and I kind of kept my head away from the 2x4. They're really stupid. They chained me up in the air, so really only things they could hit were my legs and my arms. So the parts that they could have really hurt me, like my chest cavity and my head, were kind of away from me. So anyway, but after that happened, I was in a hospital. Again, my parents were freaking in Europe, and they let me call up my parents, or my parents called me. I don't know who called who, but anyway, talked to my dad. I said, "Get me out of there! They're trying to kill me." And my dad said, "It'll make you tough." I said, "Motherfucker!" And I started cursing and the nurse took the phone away from me, and so that's when I really got, they're gonna that Jesuit mother fracking SOB gonna do this to me. So I, took it out on him, and he was going to visit the new Maryland bridge and tunnel thing opened, and that's where you went from like Jersey to Maryland instead of having to go through Delaware, and so he was going. So I went into the kitchen larder, got a box of sugar cubes and some saran wrap, and I kind of turned it into a torpedo that would go through the gas nozzle. And this time, the gas nozzles in those days were pretty big. They weren't like the little ones today. And I shoved this thing into his gas tank, about an hour before he was leaving. And so he left about 4:00, right? Got on the road, and they had a thing to take care of the school's vehicles, and the priest was taking one of those. And so and I had worked there too, and the car depot, whatever they call it. And so they basically said, they filled his car up with gas. Oh, where's he going? He's going to, go see his brother in Maryland, and he's going to take off around 4. So, really? How's he going? He's going, over that bridge thing. I said, really? So that's when I went into the kitchen. So I'll be right back. I went to the kitchen, you know, made the torpedo. When no one's looking, I stuffed it into the gas tank. And what happened was he drove all the way. It was like midnight. It was snowing, sleeting, and his car, the engine seized right in the middle of that 30-mile bridge tunnel thing, right where there was no little pull off. It just, the engine went clack and it stopped, right? And, he's wearing all black. It's raining, it's snowing, there's no moon, there's no light. And he gets out and he's got crutches. He's a little, gnome of a guy and, dwarf, just like the guys who, gnome us. And so, that's when the Cardinal, when the Monsignor heard about that, he called the Cardinal. The Cardinal told him, get me, drive me to New York. And that's what they did, because he knew that guy was going to. And that was the last I saw of Canterbury. And by that time, I was living in the Monsignor's house. After I got out of the hospital, they put me in the Monsignor's house so no one could just grab me and beat me like that. So, I spend the rest of that semester, at, that. And I made the feign of going to the Cardinal put me in this Catholic, Xavier, I think it's a Catholic school in New York. And that's where I met Gina O'Reilly. Her dad was a doorman at a fancy Park Avenue apartment. They lived on 2nd Avenue. And that girl was, whoa, off the hook kind of girl. First day, right? And I kind of walk in and I don't have a uniform and I'm like disheveled. I kind of look like I look now. And, and I just kind of came in and, the Cardinal had put me there. So people in authority kind of left me alone. And this girl noticed this. She was always in trouble. So she came and she said, what'd you do? And I proceeded to tell her, said, and that's when she goes, would you walk me home today? And I said, sure. So she kind of walked me home and this girl was a girl who loved being intimate in public places, right? And so we started walking. We both had school bus. We could get on the subway or the buses, just so, our little pass. And so, we walked a few blocks away from the school and she goes, oh, this is the crosstown bus, we can take this over. And it's the one that not only goes across town, it goes up, I don't know, Park Avenue, not Park Avenue, because there were no buses on Park Avenue, either Lexington or Madison, whichever one went up down, I think Madison. And so we got on that and she took my hand and took me into the back of the bus and had her way with me. I mean, I hadn't known her more than 12 hours or even that, maybe 6. And, she did that. And then she, took me to her apartment. Her mom and her father both worked and her brothers and sisters went, and she had her way with me in the living room. I said, shouldn't we go? She goes, no, living room. And she went into her dad's booze and took out the booze and her mom had pills. And she goes, here, take one of these. And that was the first time I ever took anything of that sort for recreational purposes. But Miss O'Reilly, woo-wee. So that's how things roll with me. Meaning, most people go, oh, this is terrible. You know what I mean? I was just like, huh? And then once it started rolling, I was like, okay. So that summer comes, and that's when my parents take me to Ireland. And again, I have an amazing, the first week, again, I got a little sick because and all my parents stayed on the East Coast. It was dank. It was, and it affects me. That kind of weather affects me. Mold and dankness affect me. And so that's why I can't be in moldy, danky places, right? So, Anyway, and so I had my first Irish experience. My parents went off to see the Pope, and they left me in Dublin in that hotel in the basement with all those girls, and it was a week and a half of indulgence. And there's a side of me that likes that kind of life. And why shouldn't it? We're this, mortal material. Might as well have a good time. What was Jesus Christ's first, thing? His miracle. He's at a party. He makes wine, not just, but really good wine. If you read the Torah, if you read the Bible, the kerfuffle comes not that Jesus made the wine, but that was towards the end of the party when all the rich people had gone home, and it was just the scullery maids and folks like that got to keep partying with the bride and groom, and the father drank that wine. It was because he only bought enough wine for the rich people, knowing that after the wine would run out, the party would end. But Jesus' mom said, "Hey." So he made the best wine. And so when the rich bride's father showed up back, and because the guy who ran the hall said, "Hey, listen, I want some more money. The party's still going on." And it's so he comes here and he goes, "What's going on?" And he drinks the wine, and it's the best wine he's ever tasted, of course, made by Jesus Christ. And he turns to the guy, "So why did you turn this out for the rich people? Why did you give that slop you gave us in the beginning?" He said, "Well, that was my best wine. This stuff, that guy made." So, I'm just following in Jesus' footsteps, having a good time, and Jesus pretty much had a good time all the time. Because look at him. Who was his, he had the putzes, his whatever those clowns were called. But his real followers were the women. Like, look at him up. You look at any painting in any church, and Jesus is up on a cross, and who's sitting around him? Not his boys. They're like, cowering. But the girls, I'm not saying I'm Jesus Christ, but I followed, have a good time, hang with the girls like Miss O'Reilly. She was a good Catholic girl, Billy Joel has a song about Catholic girls, and the beauty of Billy Joel's, that first album, Piano Man, it's the truth. And not only that, he was a nice Long Island boy like me, and grew up in Long Island, New York, with relatively, upperly mobile, middle class parents. That was me. So I got sent off to, this will be my last story because I'm getting hungry for breakfast, and it's getting towards 1 hour, and at 60:66, I'm out of here. So I get sent to this place called the Winchton Inn School for Boys, Toy Town Tavern, right? It's a golf course. It was a country club. So this moron has the rich people buy that because it's got all these, it's like a hotel. It's got all these rooms for the boys to stay in. And they have all these off buildings that they kind of renovate into kind of like classrooms, but it wasn't a school. It was a joke. And they, like the thing that was like the big garage, they turned into a study hall, So anyway, from that toy town, which on top of the big hill in town, you had to walk 6 miles down into town. And in the wintertime, we did it every day to go to that gym, right? And to do that, it was, snowing, raining. It was a drag, right? But as my dad did, it'll make you tougher. But right along our things was the New England Railroad line, freight line, and it would go up and down this hill really, really slow, because if it went fast, it would cruise through, town at 70, and, that wouldn't be good because it was a big turn. So it went down that hill at about 3 miles an hour and went up the hill like at 2 miles an hour. So we learned how to jump that freight. And right about the time that we would go, and we had our gym time, and it wasn't like, calisthenics. It was like, competitive sport, the hockey rink, basketball, wrestling, swimming, right? The things that that gym had. And in the fall, we had football and soccer, right? And in the spring, we had golf and tennis, to make you a good, upwardly And these kids, I went to school with Robert Kennedy's youngest son, Joe Kennedy, who was a total moron. And I met the Kennedy family. They were like so full of themselves. Anyway, no wonder they shot those people, And so, and Alex Orr, parents owned U.S. Steel. Perry Dye, they owned, the largest whiskey distillery in the world. Other people own this, that. I mean, Marilyn Lynch, Ricky Lynch. Anyway, so there were like 5 of us out of the 130 guys who were not uber rich like this. We were like there because somebody, like I was there because Cardinal Cushing got me in that place. And I had the best, we were the first, they didn't put us in the dorm. They kept us in the headmaster's house where his wife, who was like she had the whip, she had the boots. She was Mrs. Marr. Ooh, she was a piece of work. And no wonder her husband was nuts. And so, so, I mean, it was like, Mr. Marr was like, if John kept with his ex and she was a Nazi, right? They would have turned out like these people. And so that was that school, the Winchendon School for Boys. And so I had this rep that I was like, gangsta, like I had nearly torn down a school that had been around for 120 years. And, the most prestigious Catholic boys prep school that turned out, army guys and corporate guys and priests, all, ruling for the Pope, right? And that's why I learned about the city of Rome. So, I'm sitting in this place and, I'm again like this little peanut guy going, but everyone, and that's the beauty of that school. Whereas Canterbury was all about the social ladder, and they had this thing called fagging where the seniors and juniors treated the freshmen and sophomores like slaves, like the wombats. They all had these crazy names. Where everybody there, no matter what a jerk you were, what you did, they were all super rich. So they all came from this, that 1%, half of 1%. I went to school with those guys, right? Rand's son, other, kings. Anyway, so there's that school. So I'm going to that school, right? And and I'm still this little peanut of a guy. I really haven't grown. It's not until the summer of my sophomore year, soon to come. Anyway, so we learned how instead of walking at 6 miles in the middle of a snowstorm, we would just, because you could wait 15, it's like waiting for a subway. You could wait for that train and still beat anybody who's walking down, right? Even though it's 20 minutes. And there was like one of these little places on the golf course where we would wait, a little hut. And the train, you could hear it. It would blow its whistle, like almost telling us it's coming. And we would go out there and the train would come. And it would, before it went down the big hill, kind of went up a little hill. So it was kind of cut in that hill. So you were right here, right where the door was. So you could almost, and the doors, if they had those doors open of the boxcars, they were, 20, 30 feet. So you could almost literally just step into that car, right? And then when it would roll down into town, it wasn't a real yard there for the trains, but there was a switch to go in 3 different directions. So they would slow down almost to a stop where you could get out and just, go into town, right? So we would do that. And one day I did. And the guys, all the girls who went to the high school down in that town wanted to get knocked up by these really rich kids because they would either get, paid off or, marry a really, really rich guy and then get paid off. So those girls were thrown, and the really best looking, hottest of the girls of that high school wanted to have sex with us. Like, I mean, there was times in the spring where they would come up and knock on our windows. It was like, it was unbelievable. Anyway, so it was so guys would take that train down to go see their girlfriends down there, right? And so people were taking that train not just to go for sports, but to anytime they wanted to go downtown, get a drink, and all of the facilities down there where they knew the guys who had bars, they would give these guys, not give, but sell. So a $2 bottle of whiskey, these guys give them $20. They had more money than God. So it was it's supposed to be like this really serious, like almost prison, but it's like prison. You buy all that stuff in prison. When I worked in prison, it was amazing what you get in prison. I'm on one of these trains, and for some reason, either some young Turk who didn't know better started going down that hill fast. So by the time we hit that yard, we were going pretty fast. And the other thing he did was, instead of getting switched to go, this way, he went straight, and that train went straight to freaking Canada, and just went faster and faster. And it was springtime, so it wasn't. So I am in my little, prep school uniform, and we hit Montreal, and the bulls of the train yard up there go looking in the cars, and there I am. I'm hard pressed to jump the 5 feet. I've been spoiled, and so they get me out. They take me in. So what happened? I said, well, I just kind of got on singing. It didn't slow down, and here I am. And so they called up my headmaster, and he was pissed. And so he came and got me. He normally didn't drive. His wife drove, but she didn't want to. So he came up and got me. Did he come in? No, his son, his Playboy son. And we took the long way home. His son was, he was of that whole family. He had a hot wife, and he was having a good time. So anyway, I missed it by a few seconds. So that's it, gang. That's the story. I'll talk to you later tonight. Hope you enjoyed it. But remember, just say no. No to any bullshit. And that's what all these stories were about. I could have caved in any one of them, but I was too stupid to cave. And, I am a lucky bastard. All these amazing things. It was like I was sent into had to spend frigging summer in a Catholic school. And who's the first person Miss O'Reilly, who has her way with me on the bus, but then 4 hours of seeing me. And then she goes, I like you. You're fun. You know people. Because I took her out once to a jazz bar in Harlem. And all those people up there knew me because I had, wired their jazz bar, And I took her to a black disco. And they knew me because I had wired the black disco, She thought that was like, you don't brag about anything. You just show me and do things with me that I love. And you don't freak out that we're having sex on the bus. Once you kind of get comfortable, you go at it. I mean, we would, we like 2 dogs in heat on the F train, and there were a number of times that after we were like, we'd look up and there would be a crowd around us applauding. I don't know how many times that happened. There was times when people threw money at us. And that's the kind of life I live. Even to this day, stuff happens like that. People, oh, how you go? Oh, now, my brothers and sisters, they're like my dad. He'll survive. They've seen me through worse. And, my older sister, she's quite nice. Where my other siblings, they don't even answer the phone. They'll message me back. Can I call you at my convenience? That's my brother's. Ow. Anyway, and my oldest sister has known for years that, I knew what was going on. Because when she graduated from one of the most prestigious women's Catholic colleges, which she was pissed. She wanted to go to she was smart. She could have gone to Yale. She could have gone to anywhere. But my parents sent her off to that, right? Because that was the only school she got into. She applied to all these schools, but the nuns didn't fill out the paperwork for her. They wanted her to go to that school. And she was pissed at that. But she's kind of like me. She makes do with whatever she gets. Anyway, she graduates from that, top of her class, rocket scientist girl, right? And the only job she could get was in the steno pool at a Wall Street firm, right? She's making $70 a week, right? And and she's staying at my parents' apartment, so she doesn't have to pay rent. And so I have got my own place. I'm living with Alan, the famous G of poetry, right? Ginsberg, right? And he's my roommate. He lives upstairs. There was a staircase that went up to there. I had a garden. He had a kitchen, an amazing bathroom. My toilet was like out in the garden. And so he wanted to do gardening. I wanted, a nice bathroom and a kitchen. And we would have these Friday night dinners with all the intelligentsia, the avant-garde, the bohemians would show up. And that's what got me into my Friday, potluck dinners over the years. So I told and I would come home on Saturday or Sunday to do laundry when my grandma was there, and she would make, Saturday or Sunday dinner. And my sister, where are you? And what are you doing? Because I was still going to high school, but this was summertime. I was going to, and Winchendon was great. We went to school 7 days a week. And so our school year was from the end of September, almost October, to the end of April. We spent more hours in school than most kids, but, we got to get on that love train. So I said, well, I have my own, you have your own place? I said, oh, yeah, I have these parties. Here's the address. We're going to have one next Friday. Why don't you come? So she shows up and she sees all of this, and she, splendid, because Alan, came from, he had connects money. And so he decorated, and he was a decorator, and it was a nice place, and we had this garden in the back that was like, half an acre, in Lower East Side, big wall, because it had been a nunnery. And it was a posh place. And you went downstairs to my little thing, and I had my little sleeping loft over there. And then the rest I turned into my library and my workroom. And so, you came from Alan's palatial thing down the spiral staircase into my apartment. And it was just a scant hop, hip, and a jump. And I turned whatever little nosh of a kitchen I had into a wet bar for the party out there in the patio. And my sister came down, and she just looked around and said, I went to the best women's college, Catholic women's college in the world. I graduated top of my class, and I'm working with girls who didn't even finish high school, and I make $70 a week. And she goes, what do you make? I said, $500. And she goes, $500? I said, yeah, I'm an electrician. That's what I get, and that's just salary from my boss. I make a lot more doing other stuff. And she just, instead of her staying there, having a good time and meeting some of these guys, because that's why I said, well, you should come down and meet. These are nice parties. You'd like. Instead of her getting into that scene, she went home and married a real jerk. The guy that my parents picked out, who was Italian, went to a good Catholic college. He was an accountant, but a philanderer. They had 6 kids, and then they divorced. So that's the real choice you got there, kids. Go serve love's co-creation, and have your bookends be no and no. No, I won't do that crap, and KNOW, I'm going to know what's going on, right? So I can serve love's co-creation better, and not be like a canary in a coal mine, waiting to be poisoned, because that's what this nouveau riche 19 is. It's a poisoning of the human race. So with that, I will say au revoir. I'm going to go have breakfast. It's almost lunchtime.